Back in 2014, NVIDIA had just launched their GTX 970 and GTX 980 GPUs to pretty decent reviews. While those cards were pretty good and generally carded as fantastic cards, they weren't really that great at 4K gaming unless you used SLI, with rumors brewing about AMD releasing GPUs that were actually competitive with the 970 and 980. NVIDIA had to do something. Well, what NVIDIA would release just 9 months later would rock the 4K gaming community and gaming as a whole. Today, we are looking at the mainstream flagship that NVIDIA had back in 2015, based on the Maxwell architecture, the GTX 980 Ti. Yep, here she is, the GPU that I used for nearly 2 years with my main desktop. When NVIDIA released the 980 Ti, most people expected a decent spec bump up from the core inside of the GTX 980. But no, this was a much different beast. With only 256 less CUDA cores than the Titan X, it really was just a Titan with half the VRAM pretty much. With 2,816 CUDA cores, it was, and still is, a powerhouse. The base clocks of 1,000 MHz and boost clocks of 1,076 MHz are rather slow compared to what we see today, but for the time, that was as fast as you could get. It came with 6 gigs of GDDR5, 2 gigs more than the GTX 980, on a 384-bit memory bus, and supports the DirectX 12.1 feature set. It was about typical in terms of power consumption for its time, requiring one 6-pin and one 8-pin PCIe power connectors, capable of drawing up to around 250 watts. Anyways, the 980 Ti still gets current driver updates and is easily able to be thrown into any system you want, given it has a good enough power supply. Anyways, that's enough with my spec rambling. Let's head on to games. Due to the fact that this was my GPU for so long, I know really good games to test its performance with. And also, seeing as how so many people are picking up Quest 2s these days, I'll be adding a few VR games I have to the list to give you an idea of just how well this card holds up in the modern era. Due to me not knowing asynchronous space warp halves your FPS if you can't stay at a constant 120, all of these performance figures for VR are going to be at about 60. First up, however, is the Vivecraft VR mod, a modeling VR Minecraft for Java edition. Runs at 68 FPS with lows dropping down to 32. Next up is Dirt Rally 2.0 VR, which ran with 58 FPS with the 1% lows getting fairly low to 42 FPS. It honestly looked a touch like a late generation PS3 game. The last VR game I decided to test, Elite Dangerous, obviously ran pretty good at 59 FPS with lows only dropping down to 52. Due to the edge of this game, it came out around the same time of the 980 Ti launching, so the fact that it can run Elite Dangerous really well doesn't surprise me much. That's enough of the VR games now. We will go ahead and look at normal 3D games. BeamNG Drive ran pretty good with 108 FPS and lows hitting 73. I had only one car spawn on the West Coast USA map, so as to make sure that we weren't going to be seeing a CPU bottleneck. Crossout ran really good at 130 FPS with lows rock solid at 102, and was an experience that you couldn't really complain about. Ovorian, with a late game galaxy and a very large ship with a dense sector, ran at 123 FPS with lows that were still good at 63 FPS. And last but not least, Shadow of the Tomb Raider ran quite well at 67 FPS with lows only reaching down to 48. Also, as a last minute test, I decided to throw in 3D Mark's Firestrike and got a score of 15,137 points for the 980 Ti. So these benchmarks make it very clear that the 980 Ti isn't going to go out with a whimper. It's going to go out with a roar. The fact that a 7-year-old graphics card is still hanging out in the mid-range graphics cards today, like the 1660 Ti, is really quite impressive to say the least. Now it's time to move on to something more productive. Given the fact that I used this card for over 2 whole years, it never once gave me any driver issues or any real fussiness to speak of. And since this GPU is as powerful as it is, using it for web browsing is obviously going to work great. But what is more resource hungry than web browsing? Well, video editing and rendering, of course. While editing this video, the playback frame rate hovered at 30 frames per second with the stock Blender video editor settings, while playing over the most complex section, which I'd say is the bar graph section. Actually rendering the video with the experimental Cycles GPU render up to the point that I'm at in the editing process resulted in a render time of 14 minutes and 12 seconds, rendering this video at 1080p at 60 FPS. While that doesn't sound all that good, it is still faster than rendering on my 12-core Ryzen 9 3900XT, which is still a compliment when you consider the age of this GPU. Other than that, all I can really say is that it suited my needs perfectly. And did for a very long time until I ended up getting that VR headset, which necessitated getting more powerful hardware for the likes of Dirt Rally 2.0. Now, with all that out of the way, it's time to conclude. Oh wow, this turned out to be a pretty short video, didn't it? Well, honestly, I didn't have any huge hate storm to spew to this card, so I didn't really need a big section yelling at plastic and silicon like I did with that Transformer book. A fun little tidbit is, other than the Titan X, this is the most powerful card that is still compatible with Windows XP. The 980 Ti can typically be found right now for about $230. But the issue is that the 1070 can also be found for the same exact price at about $230. So this has changed a bit since I bought the card back in August 2020. Back then, 1070s were going for $200 to $220, and the 980 Ti was going for about $180, $190. Since I was earning my money mowing lawns, I didn't feel like waiting longer to get the extra money for the 1070. I just got the 980 Ti. Given that the price is the same today though, just get the 1070. Anyways, that's it. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and you can show your enjoyment by hitting the like button, along with the subscribe button and that shiny bell, so you can be notified for when my next upload is. Next video is probably going to be a while out, like I said. I had to get this one done so I could get rid of my 980 Ti. Anyways, that's it from me. DDT, out.